Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes a pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you're at, however you're listening. We appreciate it each and every week, coming off the heels of a Showtime pay-per-view card that we will jump into in a moment. But once again, he's back this week. The Insider's Al Dawson returns to the Last Round. Thank you again for joining us, Al.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me back. I really enjoy being on your show.
Appreciate it. So, like I mentioned, right now we're coming off the heels off of Showtime pay-per-view featuring Gervonta Tank Davis, who gets the 6-round TKO over Rolando Rolly Romero. Davis retains his WBA lightweight 135-pound regular title. Before we get your analysis of the actual fight itself and the outcome, what was your prediction prior to this fight? How did you think it was going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite hard to bet against Tank, especially when he's fighting guys who aren't Tio, Loma, Kambosos, you know, the top of the division. When he's fighting these guys who are below that level, I'd always pick Tank. I think he's just a beast, and what he did to Romero is just what we're kind of seeing again and again. He's got like Wilder-esque fight finishing capability, and I was kind of expecting it to. I didn't expect it to happen that early, and I didn't expect Romero to look. I had him up at least 2 rounds after the first 3, so I was expecting Tank to be a lot more dominant. And more active. He was less active than what I thought. And Romero was just very awkward, weird style, but I was really mesmerized by the whole fight. I think it's just when you have these two guys who can end a fight at a moment's notice, but they're not going at each other like, you know, that cliche of Hagler Hearns. I was gripped through the whole thing. I thought it was an awesome fight, and just that finish, that the highlight reel that Tank Davis is building is sickening. You know, like that's I spoke to Stephen Espinoza a few weeks ago about the fight, and he was saying to me, you know, if he was trying to sell the artistry and the ballet of boxing, Tank and Romero just wouldn't be it. You know, this is something for the savages, like everyone who's listening to this show. And yeah, the matchup I feel like was quite divisive for boxing fans. But in I suppose defense of Mayweather Promotions and Showtime, it's if you know Kambosos and Haney are tied up for the whole year. I suppose there's only a few matches you really want to see Tank in, and then if you're not getting those fights, it can, I suppose, feel disappointing from a fan point of view. And I am a fan as well as a reporter of the sport, so I really want to see the fight. I want to see the most is with Ryan Garcia, and it was awesome that he was there. But for the fight itself, it was Romero did more than what I thought. I really want to see him again and again. I thought it was really entertaining in the build-up. I feel like that he's just got like just a quite like interesting attitude where I feel like he could be really enjoying himself and he'll still look pissed off.
Right.
You know? I think he's got that face. And I spoke to him for not too long when he had the open workout here in Vegas at the Mayweather gym. And he just has definitely a swagger about him that when he walks in the room, he wants you to notice him, and you do notice him. He's definitely got an it factor, I think. You know, I get that he's not everyone's cup of tea. He is mine. I think you know, in this sport, we just get so many characters, and he's definitely a character that I want to see again. And the promotion helped him shine in that respect. What did you guys think?
Well, I thought he did way better than I thought. I know when we spoke about it last week, Mike and I were talking about it, and my X factor, because obviously, especially if you look at the betting odds, the Vegas betting odds, he was a huge underdog. So if you bet on him and he actually pulled out the win, you would have won pretty big. And I think it was more because Rolly's, especially in comparison to somebody like Tank Davis in the sport, is virtually unknown. And Tank is such a star. His profile is so much larger, and he's been building that highlight reel of knockouts and all that stuff that everybody kind of relies on that to like, oh, yeah, Tank will eat him alive. But what I was telling Mike last week is that they both have essentially grew up in the Mayweather gym, especially Rolly, who lives in Las Vegas. And that Mayweather gym it's not a joke. You know, they go, what do they call it, Mike, when they spar for like 15 rounds or something, like the doghouse. Yeah. So Rolly's been a part of those situations. He's been, he's taken that hard training in there and stuff. So I thought that was something that people were overlooking in terms of Rolly Romero, that he knew, okay, he knows how Tank Davis, kind of the background in terms of training, especially around the Mayweather team in a way, if you want to say something like that. So I think that, especially with only 14 fights in for Rolly Romero, I think that definitely helped him in a fight against somebody like Tank Davis, who's been a part of the Mayweather team for so many years now. Even though he got knocked out, I still think that it puts him it elevates his position within the lightweight division, where other big names are still going to make fights with him in the future, and he'll get decent paydays. And like you said, he has that personality where he's going to help you sell the fight. So yeah, it'll work out.
He hurt Tank. I thought he connected at least with two shots that I really thought, that's hurt him. Like, I'm not sure what round it was. I want to say like the second. It was definitely quite early, because I feel like, as soon as it got past the halfway point of, it lasted 6 rounds. I mean, the halfway point, like round 3, it was all Tank, really. I feel like Romero's best work came in the first 3 rounds. But yeah, he definitely hurt. He definitely connected with shots that seemed to make Tank throw less. He was definitely respectful of Romero's power.
Absolutely, yeah. That I think even Tank Davis admitted it in the post-fight press conference that he acknowledged Romero's power. He's like, oh yeah, he's strong. So I think once he felt the punch during the fight, I think Tank Davis knew, like, okay, I'm gonna have to counter him. I'm gonna have to kind of fight off my back foot and catch him, because he's coming forward, and Romero is naturally the bigger guy. He was the bigger guy in there. So but I mean, Davis figured it out, and he caught him with that overhand and knocked him out. And I think that the interesting thing about it is that Davis even said after the fight that punch he didn't even throw it that hard. He just caught him. He's like, yeah, there wasn't that much power behind him. He's like, he just caught him because his momentum came forward, and it added more to the power of that actual punch. But what did you think about, I think, if I remember correctly, the 3 judges' scorecards after the knockout? I believe Romero was up on 1 and Davis was up on 2. Did you agree with that?
I wouldn't have had Romero winning by, you got to score the 6 for 10-8, right? Or did they not? Yeah, but like the 5 rounds before it. Yeah, I mean, I would have had Romero up 2 after 3, but then I had Tank in control. So I don't agree that Romero was winning by the time the stoppage occurred. And if the referee the referee, I thought, and I don't know if Mike agrees, because coming from England, there's that stereotype about a British stoppage, right? I don't see that as a controversial stoppage at all. If he allowed Romero to continue, he would have left on a stretcher. There's no way. He didn't know where he was walking out the arena. He Tank fucked him up. And if the referee allowed him to continue, it would have been so much worse for Romero. I thought it was a brilliant stoppage, and it's the sort of thing do sort of sometimes see in Britain, where you think, oh, you should have allowed him to go on, but for what? You know, his eyes were all over the place. That's what the referee was looking when he said, no, can't carry on. You know, his legs were still wobbly. And I feel like I think he even mimed to his dad when he put his arm around his dad when he was like literally right at the edge of, you know, walking out the venue, the arena rather, not the venue. I feel like he said to him, what happened? You know, he was in no fit state to continue. And so one, great stoppage, but two, it's just a testament to how hard Tank hits. You have finishes where it's like a referee steps in because he's just you know, somebody's not answering, or they've had enough time to, you know, fight back, but they're not. You know, you sometimes have like flash knockdowns and you have too many of them in a round. But this sort of power is, Wilder-esque. I said it before. It really reminds me of like Wilder fucked people up, and so does Tank. And he's doing it at the level now that's like that sort of you know, he's finished Leo Santa Cruz like that, contender, former champion, contender at the time he fought him. You know, he's messed Romero up, who's, you know, you could probably say is fringe contender level at best. So it's the only question mark is if he can do that to someone like Theo Lopez, and I feel like, you know, Kambosos knocked him down. I don't know why Tank wouldn't be able to, you know, fuck him up too. Tank's power is scary. I'm scared of Tank, you know, and I'm a lot taller than him. I remember like one of my few interactions with Tank. I've said this story a few times, but it was in 2017 when he came over to the UK to fight one of the Walsh brothers. I think it was Liam. And we were all backstage at a place called York Hall. Mike will know it. It's like one of the hallowed grounds of British boxing. It holds about 2,000 people, and it's like this. Everyone who's anyone, if you like, so many. I don't think Anthony Joshua would have boxed there, but so many big name fighters have started their careers at York Hall. And yeah, this fight was the fight wasn't at York Hall. So, but there was an open workout there, and we were backstage. And I had my camera phone up, and I was about to take a picture of Tank, and he just looked up. You know, he had his hands wrapped. He looked up, and he just shook his head very silently, and I, like, as if to say no photos. My finger was right on the camera, like, you know, the camera ready to take the shot, and I was just like, should I just sneak it in quickly, or, you know, just stand down? So I stood down. I was thinking, you know, it's just like he's just got this very quiet, intimidating aura, but I feel like he's coming out of his shell a lot more. I feel like the comparisons to Canelo are quite apt. Canelo doesn't throw, you know, they're both not very active in the ring, but they're so precise with what they do throw. And recently, you know, Canelo's been coming out of his shell a lot. The way he's speaking English, he resonates more with like English speakers who can, you know, see his personality a lot more. And I feel like Tank is he's getting really comfortable around, you know, media and the cameras, and we're seeing his personality a lot more. Yeah, you know, he's like I don't know. It's quite weird. He's definitely scary, but he's also quite smiley, and he's a really nice guy. You know, like, because he's like, he seems really warm in that post-fight press conference. Not Jim Rome. What's his name? Jim Gray. That was weird. You know, I like Showtime, but that was weird. I don't think that needed to be said at all. I wasn't equating what Tank was saying about no safety on this Glock in his post-fight speech. I thought that was just like a quippy line that Jim Gray didn't really need to go to the you know, the shooting in Texas to say, you know, let's not have gun talk. I feel like that was just you know, and Tank's reaction was just like you saw straight away, like his face changing. But yeah, the undercard, I mean, that whole show was all built around Tank. You know, Corey Erdman did a really good story on Boxing Scene about, you know, like what people are getting out of a Tank Davis show, and you know, you hear it from Leonard Ellaby as well. It's entertainment, and you know, they have successfully built him into this attraction, and I feel like it's only going to get bigger and bigger.
Right. Mike, what do you think about the fight in itself?
I think Al kind of summed it up what I was going to say. Like, when you watch Gervonta, he has that very Canelo sort of style where he doesn't throw much, but it's precise and it's heavy-handed. And at no point when, you know, Romero started off really good, no point did I think, well, you know what, Romero might sneak this. You could just see that Gervonta was kind of like, okay, like, let's just wait for this opening. Let's wait for, Rolly to make a mistake. And he did, he kind of like threw and lent in, which gave, Gervonta that space just to come up and under and, just perfect shot right on the chin. And like you said, when it's placed to perfection, you don't need that added power. It's just in the right place at the right time, kind of Rolly coming in. He just swung it, caught him kind of square right on the kind of the jawline around here. And yeah, that's all that she wrote. But I think, Rolly was kind of lucky to really be WBA champion anyway. He kind of got given that, didn't he, on the points decision against, I can't think who it was now.
Yeah, it was a controversial decision.
Decision, and they never run back. He just kind of like robbed in and ran off with the world title, didn't he? Or the regular title. So, but, it was a good show. I thought Rolly at times was a little bit childish with some of his build-up. But that's kind of like his role, isn't he? He was kind of, for once, he was kind of like the villain. And Gervonta was kind of like, he was the good guy in it, which was kind of like unusual. But, I think we were all hoping that, after this one, he was going to say goodbye to Mayweather Promotions and hopefully sign with like Matchroom Top Rank. But it looks like he's going to stay with Mayweather / PBC. And yeah, we'll probably see him, just run all around all these different people. And we'll never see him face like Teofimo if he stays at 135 or, Ryan Garcia.
I think in regards to that, I think Tank wants to fight everybody else. And now you give me your take on this after, but I think Tank wants to fight everybody else. But when Floyd said at a press conference, one of the last fights he had, when he pretty much confirmed saying like, we don't need to fight anybody outside of PBC and Mayweather Promotions. Like he said the quiet part out loud. And I think that's what really irritated a lot of fans. It's just like, Tank Davis is so good that his star power is so good that those other fighters, you have the negotiation power to bring them to you to Showtime, and Davis would likely be the favorite to win. Like he's like Errol Spence. I feel like for PBC, where when you need a guy under the PBC banner to go over there and get that win, you send Errol Spence. Errol Spence is your guy. And I feel like Tank Davis is that same guy, especially with these other lightweights. So I think when Floyd kind of said the quiet part out loud, it really gave a lot of, it put a lot more gasoline on that fire that people push that narrative like, Tank, that, he's not going to fight anybody. And then saying it out loud, it kind of just alienates the fan base. But Al, you touched on Ryan Garcia being there. And then there was a little video that somebody took ringside that Mayweather Promotions tweeted out of Leonard Ellaby and Ryan going back and forth and saying they're trying to make the fight. And then Ryan, you can hear Ryan on the video saying, F Golden Boy, don't worry, I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen for December, this, and that. How realistic do you think that is, that fight can actually happen? Because you can obviously see that. And it's weird because PBC and Mayweather Promotions, especially Leonard Ellerby, they never really acknowledge like that they're making negotiations. Or they made an offer to a fighter, especially another fighter who's in another promotion. If they're making an offer to Ryan, obviously they see like, okay, this is going to be a big box office event, and we feel our guy can beat him. But do you think it's realistic that fight could happen by the end of this year?
I don't want to be too skeptical and just say no, but I feel like, first of all, that's the fight I want to see Tank in most, this year. That would be my preference. I think the way, if they announced it early enough and they built it up enough, if you've got Floyd and Oscar, you could sort of, the narrative there could be it's an unofficial rematch, for their fight in whatever year it was, forgotten now. And then you've got Leonard Ellaby on the stage with Bernard Hopkins as well. And that's not even getting to the fighters. Tank and Ryan Garcia, they're the guys for, the sort of Gen Z generation. Ryan Garcia is huge on Instagram. Tank, come on, like look at the amount of times that he brings out like Madonna. Madonna's bigger in the 80s than she is now, but he's still resonating with youth culture. And there's rappers who I'm into rap, but it's mainly from the era that I kind of grew up in, like in the 90s and the noughties. Said like some of the names that are unfamiliar to me, but I get that they're big right now. The celebrities that are there he's both of them in their own ways are transcending boxing. So when you pull all that together with the promotional figureheads on top, I just don't see how it can't be a massive runaway financial success. I've spoken to both Leonard Ellaby and Bernard Hopkins about like the fight, because like I really want to see it. So like if I was going to speak to anyone at Golden Boy or maybe the promotion's just going to say, come on, when we're going to see this, Tank and Ryan Garcia get it on, while it's, let's not marinate it for 5 years. We could have it now, and then whoever loses, they're going to come back, and then 5 years from now they can do the rematch or sooner, do it again. I just think it's probably unrealistic that it's going to happen this year. And I feel like the Jamal Charlo and Jaime Munguia failed negotiation, I think that's kind of a red flag for me that it can't get done, because the sticking point for that fight, as far as I'm aware, is that the PBC Showtime side sent through the contract offer to Munguia's team and Golden Boy for the fight to happen on Showtime, and then it was they said no, it's got to happen as a DAZN have got to be involved. I just feel like it's probably going to be the same sort of sticking point with Garcia and Davis. Garcia and Davis is a far bigger fight in my opinion than Jamal and Munguia. I feel like Jamal and Munguia is a really good fight, but I feel like it's just something that's not going to resonate beyond people like us. It's a great fight for boxing and the middleweight division, but I feel like Tank and Ryan Garcia just have something special that they've built themselves, and that when you bring that together, it's just going to I don't want to throw like a pay-per-view figure estimate out there, but I feel like it would certainly be one of the biggest fights of the year, even in the year that we've already had, and that the year that we could still have in the next 6 months. But that's the reason why I'm kind of hesitating to say yes, just because of what happened with the Jamal Charlo and Munguia negotiation.
Now, Al, do you think that, because you said that if you can pick any opponent for Tank, you'd want to pick the Ryan fight. Do you think that go ahead.
Just to jump in, I feel like Tank does to him what he's done to everyone else. It's just I just feel like it would be a great celebration of what's great about boxing. When boxing gets it right, there's nothing like it. I cover MMA as well. You don't see it in MMA, especially now. I feel like the UFC is kind of declining a little bit. I feel like their pay-per-view numbers have retreated since like the start of the pandemic, when they really were in competition with just themselves, and not even baseball and those sports were back. But yeah, I feel like maybe Haney might be more competitive, because I feel like if somebody can actually box him, Lomachenko, I think Tank beats, and who would be the other one? Tio, I think Tank beats. Kambosos if he wins. I don't know. I feel like the main challenge is potentially Haney, but the fight that I'd most want to see, just selfishly, is Garcia.
So Ryan is the box office fight, and Haney arguably might be the most competitive fight for somebody like Tank Davis.
Yeah, that would be the fight for the titles. I imagine,
right.
For the undisputed championship. But that fight can't be made until probably next summer at the very earliest, because let's say Haney comes back to America with the belts, he's then got to go back to Australia to do the rematch anyway.
Right.
That's how that whole the championship is completely tied up. For at least 9 months. Six. The fight is this weekend, and then they'll fight again probably this year, and then whoever's going to win that second one. Maybe Kambosos wins and they're going to have to do a trilogy. I don't know. But, right. The fight that, I just want to see Garcia. But again, you kind of listening to what Leonard Ellaby was saying on the Last Stand podcast with Brian Custer. I think that came out today. And it has to make sense for both parties. And that's when a fight tends to happen. It makes sense for Tank's side, to have it now. Because I feel like they'd probably be pretty confident that he'd win conclusively. but for Garcia's side, maybe they would want a title to be on the line or something. It's just I don't know. It just seems like it would be the biggest non-title fight for quite a long time, probably.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. But we'll see. I mean, I think we'll see, if anything, at the earliest next summer, possibly. But, only time will tell. Also on the card in the co-main event, Erislandy Lara gets the eighth round TK over Gary Spike O'Sullivan. This was for the WBA middleweight title as well. I believe I don't know if it was an interim or regular title. Lara, I think he's almost 40 years old, 38, 39 years old, and he's still going. Al, do you think Lara is he fighting his way back into a significant middleweight bout with one of the big middleweights?
Not with a win against Spike. No offense to Spike O'Sullivan. I just feel like the way that his career is at right now, that's not the win to get you back into the title contention, just for me. Lara probably could have closed the show a lot sooner, if I'm going to be picky.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he was playing with, there was, I can't remember who said it. I feel like it was a journalist. So I'm going to quote them, but, he was playing with his food a lot in that fight. But yeah, I saw him. I didn't speak to him. He was at the public, well, not the public, the media workouts at the Mayweather gym. And, the way he was moving then, and, he didn't really do anything to suggest that I could probably phrase this in a lot better way. I think he's still got something to offer, but I don't we need to see it against a much better opponent than what Spike is at in 2022. Do you
think Lara is a potential opponent for Jamal Charlo at 160, since Jamal Charlo is kind of on the outside looking into the other middleweights?
I think that's probably a good shout, just because of Jamal's just having a really weird run at middleweight, and someone like Lara just gives him name value if he then can't get, they've tried and failed to get Munguia, which would have been great for, I don't know who you would put in that fight. I mean, I actually saw Munguia in the Canelo Fight Week. It was at a restaurant in, on the Strip. And I knew that he was training for a fight, because he was like dieting. I was sitting on the same table as him, and we were speaking through translator, because he was mainly Spanish speaking. But yeah, he was plant based, but he is big, man. He's a big guy for a middleweight, like at least 2 inches taller than me. He must be 6'1", probably. It must be 6'1", but he's looking big at the weight. Maybe I'm just surprised at how big middleweights in boxing really are, but he looked like a big middleweight. But what was the original question? Oh yeah, Jamal and Lara. Yeah, I mean, people would probably still criticize that matchmaking. The thing with Jamal is that he's fought so many people at middleweight that fans don't want to see him fight, that it's now becoming like I don't want to say an Andrade, like a Demetrius Andrade situation, where, a significant portion of your career is spent in fights that aren't meaningful to, the overall sort of title landscape, which is a shame, because I feel like Jamal, just contrasted to Jamel, what Jamel's done at 154, and I don't think he's moving up. Just there's so many still fights that he's what he's done at super welterweight. For me, I've said it before, it's a World Boxing Super Series-esque run that he's done, and he deserves to be lauded and hailed. That's
a good comparison. I like that.
Yeah. Like how Usyk was praised after he won the cruiserweight the tournament. Josh Taylor, he was praised and put on the pound for pound list. Callum Smith had kind of a weaker standard of competition in the World Super Series than the other guys. Andre Ward, back in the original format of when it was called the Super Six.
Super Six, yeah.
Yeah. There was another one as well, wasn't it? Bradis. But yeah, out of all of them, Taylor and and Usyk got put on the pound for pound list. But Jamel, the quality of his competition, I think, is still strong. Strong enough to warrant. I'm amazed that he's not in some people's top 10. But and he can still fight Zhu, and I mean Fundora is going to be nuts. That's such a cool. I still think Fundora and Lubin's one of the best. It's the best fight I've seen live this year in person. Taylor and Serrano. There's one other that I keep forgetting. That was quite early on in the year. Might have been taken place in Europe. Can't remember. But yeah, there's fights at 154 for Jamel still. That they're big fights. He can. It's rare. Is it rare when you unify all the titles? Usually the person moves up. I don't know if I'm just making this up.
Typically, but do you think you kind of made me think about this now? If Jermell stays at 154, even now that he's unified and become undisputed, do you think there's a possibility that Jermell and Al Heyman look at the possibility of Spence or maybe Crawford moving up and fighting Jermell at 154?
I feel like it would just. I mean, who does Derek James take in that fight? It's difficult for him. I in my head, I kind of think like once. I am generally optimistic about Crawford and Spence. I think that's. I feel like that is probably going to happen in the next, if not this year, then early next. And then whoever wins then is, what is there left to do at 147? Maybe fight Boots, Stanionis. I don't know if he's got the sort of name value to really warrant staying. I feel like, once one of whoever wins, Spence, Crawford, once they move up, maybe that's then time for Jamel to move up. So, but if Jamel fights and beats Zhu and Fundora, yeah, he's cleared out the division. He doesn't really need to fight. If it does turn out to be Spence who beats Crawford, I could probably then see Jamel moving up to 160 and the title's becoming vacant. But then Spence kind of has these, sort of round robin fights against the PBC super welterweights. Like, I mean, even Tony Harrison, he boxed well in February. The only main criticism about Harrison is I don't want to see him fight more frequently. But yeah, his boxing skills, he showed that he still got it. I mean, you're sport for choice, I think, in that division. Like Spence could fight plenty of guys before he even needs to go for Jamel. I just feel like I don't know that Derek James, who does he take?
Yeah.
He think like he's going to win, and then he picks he's going to train who he thinks he's going to win the fight. But then I don't know. Like it would be such a big fight that whoever Derek James doesn't take, you've then got like an Anthony Joshua situation where you join Robert Garcia's crew, and then is that enough time to then fight? One of the biggest challenges of your life. For Joshua it's Usyk, and for whether it's Spence or Jamel, that would still be like the most significant fight they've had. Certainly, like crowd size would be. Oh my God! I've just like how big of a crowd in Texas would that? Surely that would be 60, 70,000 people if Spence is pulling in 40, 50 against non-Texas fighters, bringing another Texan into the show. I feel like that's what they were probably thinking of doing with the that offer to fight Canelo at 164, which I always found a bit. I found that a bit of a weird offer, if I'm totally honest. Benavidez makes sense. Jamal Charlo makes sense. Spence at 164 to me doesn't, especially as Canelo is like. I asked Canelo if he could fight Spence, and he just looked at me like I was asking a really stupid question. Like it was mainly like he just said, I can't go below 168 ever again. I feel like his days at middleweight are done. He's either super middleweight or light heavyweight. But I think if they've got any sense, they'll stay away from light heavyweight for the time being.
Right. No. Yeah. I agree with all those points. Running off the card, Jesus Ramos remains undefeated with a 10-round unanimous decision win over Luke Santamaria. Wasn't this a lightweight bout as well, Al?
Lightweight. No, I think it was. He's a super welterweight, isn't he?
Is he a super welterweight? Or maybe I'm wrong.
He's a big. He was at this workout at the Mayweather gym. He's a big guy as well. for the weight he's competing in. If he was at lightweight, he would be doing to everyone what Adrian Broner did, just going in and just bullying everyone just through sheer size. But yeah, I remember like his powers quite interesting because it's not like a sort of pop that would knock you out. It seemed more like a thudding, bruising type power that would just accumulate to the point where you just suddenly feel like your body's broken down. His power, I just think, would just get to you eventually rather than take you out like, say, Tank Davis does. But I like Jesus Ramos. Feel like he's quite, he's good looking, quite young guy. Feel like he's scandal free. Seems to have that, he could grow up to be quite like an ambassador for the sport with the way he is. And there's Arizona. He's from Arizona as well, isn't he? I feel like
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
I feel like they're building quite like a sneaky, good fight scene because Mickey Scaler, who's a young Mayweather Promotions guy, I think he's maybe like 21, 22. I think he's had about 5 fights. He was on the undercard for the he was on the undercard for the Chris Colbert upset back in February. And he brought it wasn't like a big crowd, but they were loud. And then if you had David Benavidez in a main event, Mickey Scaler, and then Jesus Ramos all in Arizona, that would be like a massive night for Arizona boxing. I feel like that state's kind of they've got the present with Benavidez and the future with one of either Jesus Ramos and Mickey Scaler. They're two really top prospects. Ramos is further along than Scaler is, but yeah, I like what I see from all those 3 Arizona guys.
Yeah, that would definitely be a big Arizona event with having all those guys there. And I'm sure PBC and Al Heyman, that whole team, I'm sure that's crossed their mind. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we see it sometime in the near future. Moving on to fight previews, this upcoming Saturday, the 4th of June for the Motor Point Arena in Cardiff on DAZN. Kenichi Ogawa, 26-1-1, goes up against Joe Cordina. This is for the IBF Super Featherweight Championship of the World. What's your take on the Super Featherweight division right now, Al?
That's actually a fight that I didn't even know was happening this weekend. Did you say it was this weekend?
Yeah, the 4th, this Saturday.
Saturday on DAZN.
June the 4th is ridiculous for boxing. That fight has completely slipped my mind with I was thinking it was mainly Kambosos-Haney and then Fulton and Roman, and they're both really good, relatively evenly poised fights. But yeah, that one's fallen off my radar quite significantly. June 4th is hopefully they're all. The Australia show will be at a random time. Oh no, is it? I think they're doing it prime time for the US actually, aren't they?
Yeah.
So sorry, that fight slipped my mind.
Isn't that a good thing though, Al, that we have so much content in regards to boxing that we're forgetting some of it sometimes?
Oh yeah, no, like whoever that I keep forgetting his name. He works for the LA Times, but that fool that keeps on saying boxing's dead. Get the fuck out of
Dylan
it.
Hernandez.
The way that boxing's come on, I feel like boxing was slow to get back in the pandemic, and the matches that were being made were. This isn't a video podcast, is it? But I'm kind of doing that grimacing emoji.
Yeah.
They weren't good, and we were kind of hailing. All due respect to him, he was very fun. But Clay Collard came out, one of the main stars of the early pandemic era of boxing. It was no wonder that UFC, they opened in May. Only 2 months after shutdown with Gaethje and Ferguson, and it was a fucking amazing fight. And Gaethje just, put on the performance of a lifetime. But yeah, like I said earlier, MMA's declined and retreated since then, and boxing's just come on so strong. And the year that we've had, it's probably been. I'm probably biased because I've moved to Vegas this year, and it's been quite a good year for me anyway. But I just feel like this year anyway, the fights I've seen have just been awesome. The events, the spectacles, and the amount of unified champions we have right now is significant. That leads, without even speaking of the amount of undisputed champions we've got. I think it's rare in the modern era to have this many sort of settled arguments about who is the man in a certain division, or women as well. Women's boxing's come on, like Taylor and Serrano. That was a massive milestone for women's boxing, and it just seems like Katie Taylor could have her pick of event type opponents, whether it's Serrano in Croke Park or Holly Holm. Holly Holm didn't seem too interested in boxing. It would only be it would basically be Katie Taylor will go home. Who else have we got? Shields and Savannah Marshall. Yeah, I mean, women's boxing seems to be rising. The only thing about women's boxing, I don't feel like it's. I feel like it's true. I just feel like as soon as you get outside the top 10 or top 15, it suddenly becomes quite thin. So, like, the key for someone like Eddie Hearn, who is one of the main people elevating women's boxing, the key is to keep on finding, the next big thing. And maybe that's why he's kind of focusing on Australia with Sky Nicholson and, Ebony Bridges is more of like an undercard co-main type fight if it's going to be an all-women show. But, Ebony Bridges she's kind of won me over a little bit, actually, with like, when she had that baseball-sized bruise on her.
Yeah.
That would have made me tap out.
Yeah, that was definitely a wild visual.
Yeah. But going back to your point, I just feel boxing's in a great spot. I honestly thought I'd be coming to America covering MMA more, and the opposite has been true. I've been covering boxing a hell of a lot more than what I thought, and I'm glad that that's the case, because I am boxing first, and I want to see the sport shine. The only challenge is I think we've just got to get back to the days of when we can be breaking 1 million, 7-figure pay-per-view sales in American homes.
Right.
There's no one that is doing that. Not even Canelo. That's the only challenge I feel like boxing has, but that doesn't mean it's dead. It's the opposite. It's the boxing's thriving. Just look at June 4th. Jesus, that fight completely slipped under my radar.
Mike, what do you think about Ogawa versus Cordina for the IBF super featherweight title?
Should be a good matchup. I think, now it's probably the time for Joe Cordina to fulfill his potential that I think all the Brits have, been thinking. He was good amateur. Kenichi Ogawa, second time he's had the IBF super featherweight. Won it when he beat Tevin Farmer, but then tested positive, was stripped. And surprisingly, ever since then, he's never really knocked anybody out. So I don't know. Could be to do with what was in the juice, I guess. But
you never know.
Yeah, so we'll see. What happens in this one, but it's clash of styles. Ogawa's heavy-handed. Joe Cordina more of the the boxer, stylish boxer, and fingers crossed he takes home the title.
Right. Running off the card in Cardiff on DAZN, Farouk Korbanov, 19-3, goes up against Zelfa Barrett. That's for the EBU, the European Super Featherweight title. And Dalton Smith, 10-0, goes up against Mauro Alex Hassan Peroni. I don't think I said that right, but I gave it a shot. And that is for the WBC International Silver Super Lightweight title. What a mouthful that is. So that event's flying under the radar, but a lot of boxing on this Saturday. And also, like Al just mentioned a few minutes ago, from the Armory in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on Showtime, second Showtime event in the last 2 weeks, coming off a Tank Davis fight. Stephen Fulton, 20-0, goes up against Danny, the babyface assassin, Roman. Roman's obviously of Southern California. We've seen him out here. This is for the WBC and WBO Super Bantamweight World titles. You touched on it a little bit right now, Al, but what's your analysis on this fight? What's your take on it? Let's start with Mike. Mike, what's your take on this fight?
Good matchup. Probably go the distance. Stephen Fulton, not really one that's heavy-handed, gets many finishes. Danny Roman kind of plods along, gets into like some type of rhythm, likes to really, go to the body, kind of watches what people do, then eventually kind of decides on, how he wants to go about his game plan. Very methodical. Someone that really goes under the radar. I think I've said, for the regular listeners on this show, he's one that's kind of like Josh Warrington for me. I always watched him and thought, he does stuff good, but he's not really amazing in like one part of what he does. And like, I always kind of counted him out, even though we used to go to a lot of his fights at Thompson's Boxing. I've been to his gym and covered him there. Every time he kind of stepped up, I was like, I don't know whether he's going to pull this off, but yeah, he always did. And, if he wins this, he would have had all the titles at the super bantamweight division, you know, because he was previously the WBA and IBF champion before and lost those to Akhmadeliov.
It's a hard one.
Yeah,
that's
if
a
I
hard
can
one.
pronounce it, or MJ as he's known. So
I like this fight. I like this fight. Fulton, Roman. You know, I got to give credit to Roman too. You know, he was with Matchroom for a while, trying to, you know, getting some fights and doing his thing over there. Then he switches over to PBC, and now he's been getting, you know, good sized fights in that division. You know, over with the PBC crowd. I like this fight, man. Roman's like that kind of guy. You know, we always kind of equate him to like the Jorge Linares's, who, you know, taking some losses in their career, especially early in their career, but then they come back and they find that second wind in their career. And I think Roman is like that, and he's still kind of on that trajectory. So it's working out for him. But who wins that fight, Mike? Is it Fulton or Roman? Who takes it? It's a hard one, right?
I know.
I think I'm gonna have to go with Fulton, but I like Roman though. But I think if you have to pull my arm, I think I'm gonna go Fulton.
The same. I mean, I'm going against Danny Roman again, and also, you know, there were people that, you know, picked him in that fight against MJ. You know, they said that, you know, his body work, and he eventually came into the fight, and, you know, when the fight was finished and you went on Twitter and stuff like that, there was a lot of people that, you know, picked him. So it is a hard one. It really is a hard one. But I think Fulton, I think he's just a better all-round boxer. I think he's got a few different ways to win. I think he can, you know, compared to Danny. So I think I would have to go with Stephen Fulton. But I mean, it's a good fight. Definitely a good fight. You know, probably one of the fights of the weekend. You know, the Kambosos-Haney is probably number one, and then I would probably go. This is
that's number two.
Yeah, this is number two.
No, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely excited for this fight. Like you said, Roman, people pick against him, but, you know, sometimes he always ends up proving us wrong. And like you said, a lot of people picked him to win against MJ. So I mean, we'll see. But like you know, props to PBC and Showtime for pulling out this fight, because this is, like you said, it's probably the number two fight of the weekend behind Kambosos and Haney within the lightweight division. So, you know, I mean, does Fulton have both titles, or do they each have one? Fulton has both, doesn't he?
Yeah. So
okay, yep. Roman is technically fighting for the titles because he's not because he hasn't had the title since he lost to MJ, right?
Yeah, he's just come back. Yeah, just had a few comeback fights. But yeah, Fulton is he's the one holding both titles.
Right.
You know, and hopefully we get to you know, eventually see, you know, Danny Roman in there again with MJ.
Maybe, you never know. I don't think we'll see that matchup again for quite a while, but we will see. Also on the card, David Morrell, 6-0, goes up against Calvin Henderson. This is for the WBA super middleweight title. Really? The WBA, man, that WBA and that PBC relationship is very prevalent, isn't it? Like, I mean, obviously we see it in the boxing world with all these facial bodies in different forms in a way, but the WBA is really right there, aren't they? They pop up at these PBC events all the time, don't they?
Oh yeah, they're going to be they're going to get there as much money as they can. That's why, you know, we see so many you know, world titles, regular titles, gold titles, super titles, because, you know, it's obviously, you know, a percentage of each of these purses. So, you know, just if you look at some of the cards that have regular, you know, a Matchroom card, you know, they always have a lot of WBA. They've probably got, you know, 2, 3, 4 fights. They're getting a percentage of those purses, and you know, every time. So
yeah, and David Morrell at 6-0 too, like already fighting for some type of title, even though Canelo is the super champion. He has the real world title at 168 pounds, but this gives them a negotiation piece, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying Morrell picked it up in like his third or fourth fight. Great fighter, Cuban fighter. Obviously, he had that extensive, like hundreds and hundreds of rounds in the amateurs. So when they come into the pros, they can, literally get like 1 or 2 fights in, get placed highly in the the top 15 in some kind of ranking division, and then fight for a world title just because they're that good. And obviously we're going to see a huge influx now of the Cubans turning professional because of the rule change. There was, I think it was last week or the week before, there was a whole host of them that were turned pro in Mexico, and I think I think all of them won, and a lot of them by knockout. So yeah, I'm sure we'll see. The Cubans, they're going to be like the Eastern Europeans, the Kazakhs and the Ukrainians. They're going to come and take over boxing. Maybe.
I believe it. I believe it. Al, do we still have you there? I know you were having some connection issues. Do we still have you there?
I think so. I can hear you guys perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So what's your we were just talking about the Fulton-Roman fight for the WBC and WBO super bantamweight world titles. What's your take on that fight?
I love that fight. I think what Fulton achieved last year was he definitely deserved to be in the conversation for fighter of the year. And if he it's no foregone conclusion that he goes and beats Roman, but if he does, and then he has another meaningful fight later this year, he's had back-to-back years like that, and it won't be long before he's banging on the door of the top 10 of the pound for pound list. I think what Fulton's, he's quite like he's got one of those guys that's got a really good distinctive style. I keep on name dropping Stephen Espinosa. It's only because I spoke to him recently, but I spoke to him and he was saying he reminds him of Marco Antonio Barrera. Do you guys see that?
I think I could agree with that.
I think Barrera's more pop though.
Yeah,
but I could see how somebody could compare the two, but obviously in terms of legacy and stuff like that, Fulton's still building his pathway.
Oh, yeah.
But I could see how maybe somebody might look at something like that. So I mean,
I've got a question for you, Alt. Before I forget, it's kind of a random one to throw in, but since moving to the US, which fighter has caught your attention that you maybe didn't see in the UK? Apart from Alexis Rocha, because you've already mentioned him.
No, I love Rocha. I think like even there's a few, but like one is just such an obvious name, but Fundora, just that fight with Lubin was, I don't know, like everyone on press row when we were watching it was just captivating, and it was just an awesome fight. And Lubin had his moment. His face was fucked up. His face was a mess, but he still was giving it a good account of himself, maybe up until maybe about 2 rounds before the end. I feel like his shoulder might have gone, and that might have been the beginning of the end for him. But the damage that he took on his face, it seemed like he was like it seemed like he had a broken orbital bone probably, and like a broken nose. But it turned out a lot of his injuries were superficial. So so I think he might return sooner than what we imagined. But yeah, focusing on Fundora, I was just seeing him live. He's massive. He's like comically ridiculously tall for the weight class. And having somebody who's 6'6" in a division where most people are probably 5'10" is probably considered big, or 5'11" probably considered big at 154. And the fact that he doesn't box like a 6'6" person should box. He doesn't box on the outside. He is literally trying to hunt for that mid-range and close-range position. So Fundora really, really, took my breath away, blew my mind, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. I'd love to see the Charlo fight. I'd love to see him as, not necessarily against Charlo, but I'd love to see him as a champion. I feel like he's certainly got the goods, just because he's just a ridiculously... He also turns it on its head about, like, for what, like, the casual boxing fan or like the general sports fan, he just flips it on his head about what a boxer, from the outside looking in, what those people think a boxer should look like. They would never build somebody that looks like Fundora, who's got I think he wears glasses. I'm not sure how strong his prescription is, but he's like got like a sister who fights as well, so like that, I mean, that will be a curious addition to... I think she's already got like 3 or 4 fights, but she might be one to keep an eye on, because I'm sure they've even messed around for each other in the ring, like training and things like that. So, if she can give as good as she gets against Sebastian Fundora, imagine what she can do in the women's division in whatever weight class she competes in. But yeah, Fundora, I just think like he's, and it's testament to Samson, the promoter. He keeps on finding these guys, man. He's like an unheralded real master of locating and recruiting just seemingly random talent. Like Sergio Martinez is a shining example of what I'm sure he was a Samson guy beginning, wasn't he, before he got with Lou DiBella?
I think he was. Right? I think you might be right.
Yeah. And he's had a few other, I think he had Magomed Abdusalamov. Like that's one of the saddest stories that still kind of haunts me today, like thinking, should I really be liking boxing when you see what happens to someone like him? But I think like I feel like he was just like this really strong, bruising heavyweight, pretty much in the peak of his life. And then he was in a really top 10 fight against Perez, a Cuban heavyweight. Is it Perez?
Yeah.
And then it changed his life, for the worse. But yeah, Samson's been involved in a lot of these like really interesting, prominent guys that just seemingly come out of nowhere. Like Fundora, he's behind Fundora too. Yeah, so yeah, I think out of everyone, Fundora's at the top of my list. A really cliche example would be Shakur Stevenson. I feel like that was quite a star-making performance against Oscar Valdez at the MGM Grand. I'm trying to think of like a few random undercard guys. Like I've said Mickey Scala already once before, and I was aware of him anyway in the UK, speaking to Leonard Ellaby like a few times on Zoom, and he signed. It's rare, like Mayweather Promotions is a relatively small roster. Yeah, a stable of fighters. I'm sure they've maybe got 50. I want to say 50, but they signed 5 young guys all around the same time as each other, and Mickey Scala was one of them. So I'm really like intrigued by how they've obviously got something that these guys at Mayweather Promotions is like recruiting them. I know Jalil Hackett. People at PBC are really, really high on Jalil Hackett. He actually fought last Saturday in the Barclays in New York and won. And he's, I'm sure he's Gervonta's preferred or favorite sparring partner. And he's only 18 years old. I might be 19 now. He's definitely one to watch. If he's not on your watch list, definitely put him on there. Whenever he fights, he's always going to be on. I think he made his debut on the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather exhibition, and he's probably had like a handful of fights. But yeah, he's from everything that I'm being told, he's the goods, and it's hard for me to kind of say. I really need to see people step up before I can say, oh yeah, he is the goods. But he definitely seems like one to watch out of the sort of younger, like the really young guys that are kind of, right at the start of their careers. But yeah, Mickey Scala and Sebastian Fundora and Shakur Stevenson. Those would be the main standouts. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Also, this upcoming, it's actually a Sunday over here in the United States, the 5th of June, from the Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, Australia, on ESPN for the undisputed lightweight world title at 135 pounds. George Kambosos Jr., 20-0, goes up against Devin Haney. I mean, like we talked about it earlier, Al. We've been lucky to see so many undisputed matchups the last couple of years, and we know it's very, very difficult to get to that point, especially with promoters, fighters, sanctioning bodies. Fees of the titles being involved in all that. But now we have it in one of the most competitive and lucrative divisions again in the sport at 135 pounds. What's your take on this fight?
Yeah, I'm just glad it's happening. It feels like I'd like these. I mean, I'm greedy. I want to see these lightweight fights happening more often. But since Tio fought Lomachenko, it seems like we're having a few of them. One of them maybe a year. And this is another really meaningful one. I think what Devin's, I don't think it's. I mean, it's a storyline building up, but he's not got his dad in his corner. because of a historic. I think it was something something on his criminal record from about 40 years ago. I kind of want to say. Apologies to Bill Haney if that's incorrect, but I think that's why he can't get into Australia. And then Ben Davison, he's got visa issues as well. It's actually quite speculative, the reason why he's got visa issues. The only thing that's clear is that I did actually speak to Devin Haney, and he confirmed that Ben Davison can't. He is having, quote, visa issues. But the only person who can sort of clarify why is Ben Davison himself, and he hasn't really, spoken in public about why he can't go to America right now, and why he can't seemingly go to Australia as well. I could definitely have a guess. It just seems. Actually, let's just finish it there, and then just randomly put out about a month ago, Daniel Kinahan was sanctioned, and then in the week since we've heard about 600 people who are having been on the no-fly list for America. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but and apparently a significant portion of people in British boxing are embroiled in that because of either an association with Daniel Kinahan through MTK Global or anything like that. Anyway, I'm sure that's completely not related to. Anyway, back to Ben Davison. So yeah, he can't go to Australia either, and I don't know. I think if you're a young upcoming boxer who's in the biggest fight of your life, and you don't have the two familiar, Bill Haney is his main coach. Devin was quite forthright about that to me, but he's not got his dad there. He's not got his head trainer there. Both, that's Bill Haney, and then he's not got, I suppose the backup or the second or the co-trainer in Ben Davison. I just feel like that's kind of the familiarity of that. We kind of think of the outside looking in. You think of boxing being a lonely sport, but in some ways it is a team sport. There's certainly a brotherhood in it. When you've got your with Devin, your dad and your main trainer, a few other trainers, strength and conditioning. He's got quite a cool hype man as well. Maybe the fact that he's got this hype man, I can't remember what his name is, but man, I heard him in the Top Rank gym, and I was like, I want to get to the point in my life when I'm earning enough money when I can just hire a hype man to follow me around, and just give me these, random, I'd probably hire Shannon Briggs actually, and he can just shout "Let's go, champ" everywhere I go, walking into Walmart. But yeah, so he's got his hype man there, but yeah, he's not got the two people who are going to be actually having any sort of the game plan's already set presumably, so he kind of knows what to do there, but all of the adjustments he's going to have to make from round 1 to 12 it's all on him. You can't really, whoever he's got as the chief second in the corner, and I presume it's 2022, we're going to be able to in real time, Bill Haney is going to be able to say something to someone there to communicate that to Devin, if not do it straight FaceTime in his face. But anyway, that's just a weird thing that you don't really need in the biggest fight of your life. I don't think it's, can that be a factor? I don't really know. And Kambosos, he's just got, I don't know, I feel like, I don't want this to sound too over the top, but he does have a bit of a Conor McGregor swag to him. Have you guys picked that up?
I can see that. I can see that, yeah.
So I feel like it's going to be a huge event, and I'm siding with Devin. I just feel like I don't want to discredit Kambosos' win over Tio at all. I just don't think Tio was right in that fight, and he might have lost to a few of the top 5 that night after shaking up the world and beating Lomachenko. So I'm not fully sold yet on Kambosos as the number one in the entire division. I feel like it's either Tank or Haney. So I'm really expecting Haney to bring the titles back to America. How do you guys see it?
What do you think, Mike?
Devin Haney has Zab Judah's dad. I think it's Yoel Judah in his corner, which somebody's posted saying that he's actually Devin Haney's godfather. So that's somebody that he's got in the corner for the fight. But yeah, I kind of actually agreed with Al. I think Kambosos was really good that night. But yeah, Teofimo Lopez was just all wrong. Like mentally, he had stuff going on in the background. I think he looks like he maybe underestimated Kambosos and maybe he struggled to make weight. So I think Kambosos, everything just fell right for him that night. And I think Devin Haney will probably go in there and box fairly smart. The only thing he does have going for him, I think, Kambosos, is Devin Haney does sometimes kind of relax a little bit and can get caught, like when we saw against Linares, we got caught at very late in like round 11 or something like that. And luckily it was at the end of the round because he kind of looked a little bit out on his feet and so Kambosos maybe could catch him, that way. But yeah, if I told me, put a bet on, I would probably put my money on Devin Haney on points.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here in terms of leaning towards Haney for this fight. But I think I'm very interested to see if Kambosos, still carries that swagger because he was obviously very confident. He's been very confident ever since he won the titles, and he's been posting videos of himself training. Like he really hasn't stopped. He's been in the zone. He's going to be in a huge Australian stadium, which I'm sure it's going to have a record crowd. All of his countrymen and women there to support him. That's a lot of people on your team right there. It's a whole country that's behind you, and your opponent is in your territory trying to take the titles and the victory off of you. But yeah, I think I agree with you guys in terms of going with Haney, but I don't think you count Kambosos out. This is obviously the first defense since beating Teofimo Lopez. Was that win a fluke? Should we put that much emphasis on Teofimo Lopez's mentality and mental health and what have you at the time of that fight? Or is Kambosos the real deal? And is he going to win on Saturday? Especially if he wins by knockout, I don't think Haney's ever been knocked out or even knocked down. I don't believe. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I think Kambosos, even coming in as the world champion, he still has a lot to prove that he is the number one fighter at the lightweight division. So, but I'm excited.
I like Kambosos. I like him. I like the fact that he started boxing because he was like a chubby little kid, and he interviews really well. And I thought it was kind of funny that he, in the press conference, he was saying that Devin Haney's a rat. He was messaging him on Instagram, before the Teofimo Lopez fight, like giving him information, kind of calling him like an informant, which, like Al said, was kind of like McGregor-esque. But look, if you look at the fights beforehand, like he struggled with Lee Selby. I remember saying on that fight, I thought Lee Selby won. I thought Lee Selby just jabbed him to death. And but he got the result that day, and I've never watched the fight back. But on the first viewing, I thought Selby won that fight. And then obviously before that, I think his biggest fight was probably Mickey Bay.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if Kambosos, I do like both of them, and I think Haney would win, but I would like Kambosos to win because I like his story, I like his interviews. I prefer his persona over Devin Haney, kind of being like a mini Mayweather, like just posting big cars and diamonds. Like I don't care, like all the money you have and the diamonds you have. Like I prefer Kambosos. He's very motivating and stuff like that. The way that you watch him. But yeah, I still think Devin Haney was. If you gave me $1,000 to put down, I would put my money on Haney points.
Historically speaking, how many times has an American fighter gone over to Australia? Like literally the only time, and it's like one of the biggest wins in boxing, but Jack Johnson coming back up, having won the titles from the heavyweight title from, was it Tommy Burns? I think it was like 1910 or something. How many times has an American gone over to Australia?
The only one, he's not American, but obviously the big one's Pacquiao, right? He's not American,
yeah,
but he's
Jeff Horn. Yeah.
I think other than that, I don't think it's pretty rare, if any at all, right?
When American fighters do go abroad, it can I don't know. I just kind of think like Errol Spence when he went over and beat up Kell Brook,
Right.
Can be quite a career shifting. I obviously away from the fact that he'd be coming back as the undisputed lightweight champion, but to go into like somebody's backyard, especially when it's Australia and the UK, when it's going to be a stadium fight or something like that. Kell Brook was at Bramall Lane. I think it was Bramall Lane. Is that the Sheffield one? And it's just like the odds are a little bit against you, aren't they, in enemy territory? I just think credit to Devin Haney or any American really, when you're coming outside of America to then try and bring the belts back.
Yeah,
Twice.
definitely a lot of credit to Devin Haney on that.
And he's going to beat him twice to beat him.
Yeah. Just like Al said, it's gonna, if he wins his first fight, they're gonna be locked up for probably the next 9 to 12 months at least. So we will see how it all pans out. Running off that card at Marvel Stadium in Australia, Jason Maloney, 23-2, goes up against Aston Paliste. I hope I said that right. 24-1 for the WBC silver bantamweight and the vacant WBO international title. And Junior Fa, 19-1, goes up against Lucas Brown for the WBA Oceania heavyweight title.
I didn't know Lucas Brown was on this card until I wrote these show notes.
Oh my God, yeah, Lucas Brown.
Yeah.
He's back,
I didn't know he was on this. He got knocked out by that rugby player, Paul Gallen, not long back. I thought he was kind of like done. So this is an interesting fight because Junior Fa, if everyone remembers, he's recently just off that points loss to Joseph Parker.
Right.
So this should be an interesting fight, an up and comer against someone, coming down the hill.
A veteran in a way, I guess. Yeah, definitely interesting. Just pops up by that. Running towards the finish line of this week's episode of The Last Round, Jermell Charlo has been ordered to next defend his undisputed junior middleweight championship versus WBO mandatory challenger Tim Tszyu. Do you think that fight happens, Al? And if you do, what's your take on that fight?
I just don't know why it wouldn't. What are the real stumbling blocks to that fight not happening? It's an in-house fight. It was a fight that was going to happen anyway, even if it wasn't ordered, in my opinion. I don't know why it wouldn't happen. I think it's a good fight, and we mentioned earlier, out of all of the options that Jermell's got left at 154, and it seems crazy that he's had to go and win one belt each time to become the undisputed champion at 154, that he still hasn't cleared out the division. That to me just means how strong that division is, how many good fights there are to be made. I'm up for that fight. I'd like to see it, just being biased because I'm here anyway. I'd like to see it in America. And then, hopefully we get Fundora afterwards. Fundora's mandatory as well. So surely it's only going to be a matter of time before that's ordered. Right.
No, yeah, definitely. With those two right now, especially Fundora waiting in the wings like that, it's definitely some interesting matchups. We touched on it earlier, but Ryan Garcia and Javier Fortuna is official for July 16th on DAZN. What do you think about this matchup, Al? And if you agree with me or not, don't you think that if Ryan is going to push so heavily, as he said on video this past weekend in Brooklyn, New York, if he's going to push so heavily for a Tank fight by the end of the year, like I think he was saying December, wouldn't it be better to put him in there maybe with somebody who's kind of closer to Tank's level, or at least the top, 3 or 4 guys in the lightweight division, if a deal could be made before fighting somebody with the caliber of Tank?
Hey, like that, I know what I know what you're saying, but I just feel like you run the risk of Ryan Garcia losing if you're going to put him in with somebody who's top 4. So, like the top 4 at light is really, really strong. And it's no disrespect to Ryan. Like if you put him in with, who's available right now that's not fight, it's Tio Lopez. It would be Tio's not got a fight booked, has he?
August against, it's supposed to be Pedro Campa.
Oh my God. Okay, that one slipped my mind as well. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not really that mad at, like, if you're going to fight frequently, I don't mind these sort of caliber matchups. I think if you're only going to fight once every 9 months, it's then an issue. But if you're fighting, who did he fight earlier this year? Was it To Go? It was a 12-round decision. and then you fight, excuse me, Fortuna, and then you fight Tank, in December. That's a hell of a year, really.
Right.
Especially being at the Crypto.com arena.
I mean, everybody wanted him in there with Jojo Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that would have been. I'd rather see that, but again, Diaz has a better shot of beating him than Fortuna. At what point does a fight with Tank lose its appeal? It's when one of them loses. The time to make that fight really isn't, sooner rather than later. These guys aren't as flawless as, say, Spence and Crawford maybe. Can Tank potentially be outboxed? Maybe. He doesn't throw much. If you've got someone who's going to just throw like 60, 70 punches around, that could be a way of, accumulating a 7-5, 8-4 points win, depending on what sort of judging you had on the night. I feel like that's probably the only way you're going to be able to beat Tank, whether or not he can nullify that at some point. He's already gone the distance, obviously, with Isaac Cruz. But excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. Yeah, but I don't know. Somebody's going to lose eventually if they're not going to be paired with each other. And the harder you match Ryan Garcia, he came off the floor against Luke Campbell. It was a really good win in the end, but there were shaky moments in the Luke Campbell fight, and I think if you put, Lomachenko did actually fight Campbell. Who else have we got in that top five? I don't think Devin Haney would struggle with Luke Campbell at the time that Ryan Garcia fought him. I don't think Tank would have struggled. But it's one of those wins where the way that Garcia did beat Campbell kind of erases what happened before, maybe. I don't know. I'm not really mad at the matchup. I definitely would have preferred to see Diaz, though.
Right. Yeah. I think Golden Boy is their tentative plan, just speculating here, is that, Ryan fights Fortuna, beats Fortuna, and maybe Jojo gets a bout in the next couple months as well to get him back in the win column, at least. And then Golden Boy tries to make an in-house Jojo Ryan fight in LA before the end of the year. I think that's the tentative plan for Golden Boy. I know Ryan wants Tank, and he was making a scene of it there in Brooklyn, but I just don't see that as likely happening, especially by the end of this year. And I think they're going to use the Fortuna measuring stick as like, oh, okay, well, Ryan fought Fortuna and knocked him out in whatever round, or knocked him out, and Jojo couldn't knock him out, and they're going to use that in the marketing, and then they're, I think there's a tentative pathway here to a Ryan Jojo fight sometime later this year, maybe in the fall or something. But we'll see. Like Al said, I do see your point. I agree with that in terms of saying, like, if he was fighting just once every 9 to 12 months, and he was fighting guys like Fortuna, then it's an issue. But if he's staying active, even if he's fighting names that we don't necessarily feel that he should be in the ring with, he should be in there with the higher caliber fighters at 135 pounds. Well, I guess it's better than fighting once a year. But
6 weeks, you can still pull out.
Yeah, maybe it's in July. You never know. He has that history, so you never know. He might protest and be like, well, if I don't get the Tank fight in December, I'm not fighting. I'm not fighting Fortuna at Staples Center or Crypto.com. I need to get used to calling it that, but we will see.
I feel like your timeline kind of makes sense. I feel like PBC and Showtime are probably going to be. I think they've got one eye on an Isaac Cruz rematch for Tank. I think that could probably happen if Garcia and Diaz fight. Maybe Tank and rematches Cruz before. Hopefully we can get those two in the ring. Eventually, hopefully they just run out of in-house opponents and they're kind of forced to make this fight. But PBC has worked with ESPN and Top Rank before. They've done those co-promotional shows, but it just depends whether they think it does enough business to warrant bringing in DAZN or involving DAZN, to split the profits, or not split the profits. Whoever buys on Showtime pay-per-view, I guess they'll just do it that way. But I don't know. I feel like we've spoken on previous episodes about Garcia and Tank, and we'll probably do it again and again. That's just, I think it's just one of the, it's going to be on my wish list until we see it. Same with like Wilder and Joshua. I want to see that. They can lose no matter how, they've both lost combined 4 times. I still think that fight is as big as it ever was, if you put that in Vegas.
Right.
And Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, that's going to happen soon. Just hope these matchups happen.
Absolutely. And the one final subject we'll touch on before we end this week's episode of The Last Round, Al. I think you touched on it earlier, but Anthony Joshua will be reportedly trained by Robert Garcia for his upcoming rematch against Alexander Usyk, likely scheduled sometime in July in Saudi Arabia. What do you think about that news? Are you surprised he went with somebody like a Robert Garcia?
I actually am, but I do think it could be a good move because it actually shows a desire for me to correct the one thing that has been holding him back ever since the Klitschko fight. He just has seemingly struggled to be as what would be the right way of saying it, like attack focused. Yeah, aggressive. Yeah, he needs to get that killer instinct back, and the being dropped by Klitschko, for me, it really affected him and made him cautious. There were moments even in the Usyk fight where Usyk tagged him, and it just made Joshua retreat for the rest of the round, and then maybe even the round after. He didn't want to go back to that distance that got him tagged, potentially thinking he might get knocked out. But by going with Robert Garcia, it's like this is a guy who trains aggressive fighters. I don't think it matters too much that he's not trained a heavyweight or like a marquee heavyweight like what Joshua is. I just feel like if it shows a good knowledge of the main weakness he has, and regardless of whether we think it's a good strategy to suddenly go more aggressive against Usyk and potentially getting finished. It seems a bit dark bringing this up, but it definitely is a storyline. The fact that there's an ongoing war in Usyk's homeland, and how much can that affect his mentality when Lomachenko is I think I'm not sure if he still is, but there was news a while back that he was going to be not on the front lines, but he was going to be joining one of the the forces. Vladimir Klitschko is rarely away from his brother Vitaly's side, who's the mayor of Kiev. And then there's other fighters as well who were in this war. The Bellator MMA middleweight champion, trying to think of his name, I think it's Amosov. He was supposed to be fighting Michael Venom Page in London next month. But he's not, he's put his whole career on hold, just like a lot of these Ukrainian boxers to fight and defend the country against the Russian invasion. The Klitschko's think, or they were saying that they want Usyk to deliver a special message, and if that's the focus going in, how much of the focus is on boxing? I know he's been training pretty much for the last, I think it feels like 6 weeks, and now they're putting the fight back even into August.
Right.
So there's two issues. Maybe like Usyk blew my mind doing what he did to Joshua. I didn't expect that, just because I knew he had it in him. His cruiserweight days were amazing, and probably emulated Evander Holyfield as the best cruiserweight of all time. But his heavyweight fights before Joshua just weren't to the same standard as what his cruiserweight was. But then he went and did that to Joshua, and it's just, Jesus Christ, what an absolute beast. But can he replicate that performance? Can he improve that performance? I don't know. Can he replicate it when these things are going on in his homeland? I don't know. I feel like that's probably going to be a storyline that is revisited at some point by other media members and things, and maybe it'll be questions that are put to Alexander. But then, obviously Joshua's, he hasn't got an issue like that. The UK's not at war, but completely change of scenery for him. But what he was arguably regressing under Robert McCracken. And this is not a slight on Robert McCracken. I actually think Robert McCracken should have been in the running for Trainer of the Year in, I can't remember if it was an Olympic year. I think it might have been 2012. He had a lot of the Olympic success, and then he had Carl Froch, who beat up Butte. I think that was the year beat up Butte. I think really feel like he should have been in the running for Trainer of the Year that year. So Robert McCracken, really, really top quality, British boxing coach. But I feel like it's a smart move to change things up. And I wasn't expecting him to partner with Robert Garcia, but I definitely think it shows an awareness of where his main weakness has been in the last, however many fights it was since Klitschko. And I'm very, very curious now to see how that plays out when you don't even have a gimme fight to test out whatever things Robert Garcia can try and bring out of Joshua and try and remind him of who he was before that Klitschko fight. You're going straight back into Usyk, who he knows can hurt him and can potentially hurt him bad, and it just depends on how I don't know. I'm really interested. I think it's going to be it's a good move, but whether it's good enough to beat Usyk is just unclear.
What do you think, Mike? What do you think about the pairing, the reported pairing of Robert Garcia and Anthony Joshua?
I mean, I think it's good that he's looking further afield. Sometimes you maybe just outgrow a trainer or need, some fresh eyes, fresh camp, to get kind of motivated. I don't think it's going to help. I picked Usyk going into it. Usyk's just a different type of boxer, isn't he? Usyk's like a natural boxer. To me, AJ is just a big athlete that was made into a boxer. And that's kind of sounds strange because he was a world champion, but, he's man-made. Usyk throws, strange combinations from strange angles at strange times. And, he's very textbook. AJ is very textbook. That's why I like people like Usyk, and I think Tyson Fury, they know what's coming. He just throws you simple 1, 2, 3, and they know, okay, a 2's just happened. He's going to throw a hook, and they know it's coming, that sort of stuff. He's very predictable. And I just don't think like they're going to, he got completely outclassed by Usyk, and just changing trainer and having a 8-week camp. Is he going to be able to solve that in 8 weeks? No, not in my opinion. They couldn't solve it if they gave him a couple of years. I just think Usyk just has his number. He can still catch him and knock him out. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I think that's the plan. I think that's why he got Robert Garcia, because he wants to tap into that aggressiveness that he once had, before at least Klitschko and the Ruiz fight. So I think that's what he's going to try. He's going to try to knock him out.
We got to catch him.
I mean, shout out to his balls on him, because to granted, Ruiz in the rematch came in a overweight condition, but Joshua had balls to take that rematch after that was he got embarrassed in New York. That was a real humiliating. That was supposed to be a coming out party for Joshua. People at Sky Sports and Matchroom wanted Joshua to be for boxing what Roger Federer is was to tennis. That's kind of the level of sporting celebrity they were really thinking Joshua could become. And that's why they wanted like a successful coming out party in America. And they just didn't get that, and they've never gone back to America since, but they took the immediate rematch. That for me takes balls, and it takes balls again to completely switch it up at so late in his career. Because look at Conor McGregor. He's never left John Kavanagh at Straight Blast Gym in Ireland. And when arguably he should have done quite a long time ago. And again, it's not to disrespect John Kavanagh. He's the first ever black belt in jiu-jitsu from Ireland. But sometimes changes just need to happen. Conor McGregor the Cerrone fight was a gimme. Apart from that fight, he hasn't won since 2016.
Right.
And I don't think he can beat many of the top guys at 155 just because he's not active anyway, but even before their leg break. But yeah, Conor McGregor's always stayed with Straight Blast Gym. It takes a lot of it takes something else to completely uproot what you're comfortable with, respect and to Joshua that he's that he's trying something really new. And if the game plan is to think, knock him out or get knocked out myself, that's amazing, because that can really go. You're really like not flipping a coin, but it could go disastrously bad. But if that's the game plan going in, there's an old saying, and it's a really niche reference to anyone who's not from the UK, but he who dares win, as Del Boy would say. In only there's some things in Joshua that I feel like he's I don't really feel like we see his actual personality. I'd love to see the real him. I don't think we see the real him. I feel like he's more like a sort of David Beckham type person, where there's so many like sponsors and people surrounding him who are telling him what not to say around the media, and to always put on this like charming offensive that we don't actually see the real him. I'd love to see the real him, but there's definitely things I respect about him, and the balls on him to do things like this, take the immediate rematch with Ruiz after that humiliation in New York, and now switching things up so late in his career, when it could go so wrong, fair play to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way, it is an interesting, it's a very intriguing and interesting decision to go with Robert Garcia, especially within 6 to 8 weeks of the bout. So either way, it's going to be interesting to see. And if he pulls it off, hey man, there you go. Make the Wilder match after that, and we'll go from there. But once again, Al, we'd always appreciate you coming on and giving us your valuable time here on the last round. Before we let you go, or we sign off here for the week, go ahead and plug all your work at the Insider, your social media, anything you got that you want to mention. The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. I just appreciate.
I think he cut out on us. Well, I don't know if he can still hear us, Al, but I think his Twitter, what's his Twitter handle, Mike? It's
Al Insider, I think.
I don't think that's it. We're helping him promote here because I think he's having connection issues, but he writes for the Insider. He's correspondent.
It's at Al Dawson Sport.
Al Dawson Sport on Twitter. He's obviously a writer, reporter, correspondent for the Insider. Just recently moved to Vegas not too long ago. So he's been covering the fight game from MMA to boxing in the Las Vegas, not just in the Las Vegas area, but Southern California area and all that. So we definitely appreciate his valuable time. And before we sign off here, Mike, go ahead, do the usual. Let them know where they can find us and follow us.
And we are at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to join us next week. We'll be reviewing Kambosos-Haney, previewing Trevor Bryan, Daniel Dubois, and Munguia, Jim Kelly.
Sounds good to me. So for our guest of the week in the Insiders, Al Dawson, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round